welcome to the Kathleen Spracklin podcast. I am a woman on a mission to help you have the Zettelkasten of your dreams on your work table beside you. Well, tonight's episode is called Best Bib Card Yet. I've been using the notes that I made from Adler's How to Read a Book, and I've used it as the model for a bib card for notes I've been taking on the first book in syntopical reading in the set to follow Simon Sinek's Start With Why. It's another Simon Sinek book, Find Your Why. And I created a bib card that follows along with the steps in analytical reading that Adler says we should follow. So let me show you the bib card, and I'll show you how it follows along with the steps, and see if you think that you like that format. For me, I think it might revolutionize my bib cards. It's a little more involved, so I'll have to test it to make sure that is something that I can really stick with. But it's certainly something that I'm going to try to use as my format, at least for the next several books, to see if I can get it to latch in as a permanent way of work. So no more tease. Let me bring you over to the down-facing camera and I'll show you what I mean. Okay, here I am with my first bib card and the little ring notes. This is like a bib card on a ring that I made from Adler's How to Read a Book so that I could capture the steps in inspectional reading and analytical reading, and then ultimately syntopical reading as soon as I get formally into that area. So we're going to begin with inspectional reading, and I'll show how this bib card tries to follow along. Well, to begin with, it's a standard bib card. I've used my naming convention, Simon Sinek, Find Your Why, and this is the first card but there's more following it. So this is the normal information that I would put on the start of a bib card from the title page. And I copied something from practice by Julianne Scherer. She puts little cutouts of the front covers of the book that she's reading as kind of a little motivational thing. I thought they were so cute. I love miniatures anyway. And so I added that as an add-on to my bib card, which by glancing at it, I'll immediately remember what book this was. So again, that's one of those practices that takes a little longer. Will I keep it up? I don't know. I'm going to experiment and see if it sticks. So as always, I include my purpose. That is something I'm now attempting to do before I even make the book purchase. And I'm trying also to make the commitment to going all the way to doing the little cover cutout and setting up the whole bib card before I commit to buying the book. And my reasoning being there is if I don't have time to make the first bib card, what makes me think I'm going to have time to read the book? So that's my motivation. Again, we'll see if it sticks. So my purpose in reading this is that I can see that for myself, I see my commitment because I post just about every day, and I'm very determined. I'm trying to make this course in Zettelkasten, but how do I state my why? So that's something we're supposed to start with why. That's what Simon Sinek says, and I've always just started by showing up. And so I'm going to try and see if I can start with why. So in the first stages of inspectional reading, of the two stages, it's an area that he calls pre-reading, and then that is followed by superficial reading. So let's see where the steps in pre-reading show up on the bib card. Now what I've done here is I've taken the step and put it over onto the card in a different color of ink so that I can distinguish the step I'm following from what I learned from the book. I don't know if I'll keep that practice up, but at least for a while, I think it's very handy. I'm pretty happy with the way this turned out. So when you see that from the title page and we're looking for the scope and aim, what is aim again? Purpose. Why? We're looking for the why of the book. And the answer is to help people and companies discover their why so they can put it to use. Because how can you put a why statement to use if you don't already know what it is? The second rule of the first stage of inspectional reading, we're supposed to study the table of contents so that we can get a sense of the book structure. And so I did that. I just copied the chapter titles and I flipped through a little bit to see how the chapters were structured. In the third step, we were supposed to check out the index, see the range of topics covered, and begin picking out some key terms. But this book doesn't have an index. It's a how-to book, and I guess they didn't think it needed an index. The fourth step in stage 1 of inspectional reading is to read the publisher's blurb and see if you can figure out from that what the main points of the book are. And so the book provided 3 what Scott Shepherd would call so that statements, and that is expected results that someone could expect to get by reading the book and applying what's learned there. And that would be to wake up feeling inspired to go to work your day feeling safe while you're there, and to go home feeling fulfilled. And then it goes on to tell you what the book supplies: exercises, illustrations, action steps, answers to key questions, but no mentions of the points of the book. So this book doesn't seem to be one that's going to present and develop a lot of points. Now at this stage, Adler says that you should stop and decide, are you going to read this book? Do you think it's worth your time to even read it? And I decided that yes, I'm going to go forward with the book. Part of the reason why I decided to do that was because it's the first book I chose in syntopical reading, and I don't want to give up on it. I don't really feel I learned an awful lot about what the book is going to be about, so I'm still curious as well. So this is the new addition to what I'm now regarding as kind of my dream bib card. At the end of step 4, what are my expectations? If I've decided that I'm going to read the book, what has changed by the amount of work I've done on trying to figure out what the book is about to tell me what I can now think I can expect to get out of the book? And so I said, I expect to be taken through practical steps to establish a clear and concise statement of my business why. And I think that's reason enough to read the book. So that answers the question, do you want to read this book? The 5th rule in stage 1 of superficial reading is to identify the pivotal chapters, the chapters that are pivotal to the points and the arguments that the book is going to make, especially looking for summary statements at the opening and closing of the book to get some kind of a feel of how the book is going to go down. Here, we're also going to be turning the pages, dipping in here and there, and looking for signs of the main contention that the author is making, and especially being on the lookout for a grand summary at the end of the book. Adler tells us that this whole pre-reading exercise, all 5 steps, should range from either a few minutes to at most 1 hour. So here's what I came up with when I was doing step 5. I thought that chapter 2 was the first key one, discover your why, but that chapter tells me that chapter 3 will be important for every reader, and that 4 and 5 will be important for those working with a group. So I picked out a few more chapters. I didn't see those summary headings at the start and the end. The book usually began with some kind of a story at the start and the end. So now, having completed all of the first stage of inspectional reading, I wanted to know, how did my expectations change now that I've dipped in here and there and I've read, say, the first and the last part of some of the key chapters? I realized very quickly that this is not an individual self-help book. This is a book that expects you to work with others. Even if you're going to be like a solopreneur, you're supposed to have a partner to help you find your why statement. So I can read the book by myself, but I cannot do the book by myself. And so now I will have to make a decision. How far do I want to go? Yes, I want to make this a reading exercise because that's what I set out to do, and I will complete that. But this may be a book that I will take back off the shelf to actually do the book and not just read the book. Now, the next step is the phase 2 of inspectional reading, the superficial reading, where Adler says just read the book straight through. Don't struggle to understand any difficult passages. In fact, don't do anything except just plain read. However, I made a couple of notes to modify this, and that is that very early on, I know from analytical reading that the first thing we're going to be asked to do is to identify all these important terms. And they're kind of hard to just find sometimes in a book. So I had made up my mind at that point that when I'm doing this reading straight through, if I spot a term, I'm going to write the term down and the page number where I saw that term, just to set myself up for being ready to do the first stage of analytical reading. So that's this rule that I made to myself. And you can see on this card that I found quite a number of terms. Now, also, as I was doing the superficial reading of this book, I realized that this book is not something that's going to be amenable to a real deep reading. There just isn't that much to be dug out of it from an analytical reading. And to me, that is a pretty exciting thing. That is not to devalue this book in any way, shape, or form. What it means is this book is designed to be performed more than read analytically. And so when I'm done with my superficial reading, then it's going to be my task to say, well, am I going to do this book? Am I going to locate a partner? Am I going to set up these meetings? Am I going to actually do the workshop that is presented in this book? It was not my original purpose, but it's something that I might consider doing if, as I complete the superficial reading, if it seems to me that it might be worthwhile, I might actually go back and do that. However, because this book will not require an analytical reading, I made an extra rule to myself that if I sense that that's happening with the rule, then I'm going to pick out ideas that I think are valuable in the book so that they don't get lost. Because otherwise, normally you're not going to pick out the key points the author makes until you get into analytical reading. But I'm not convinced I will do that. So as I read, I picked up some points that to me could make it onto a main card. And so that's an additional rule that I made. So that completed the superficial reading, it would be time to do the analytical reading. As I said, I don't really see a point in doing a deep analytical reading of this particular book. However, I have been working on an analytical reading of Simon Sinek's Start With Why. And so I'm going to now switch over to bib cards that I made during reading the Simon Sinek to finish showing you what I think is now my best design for a bib card. Now, in the analytical reading, stage 1 is finding out what a book is about, and we've pretty much covered that already in our superficial reading. But also, we're supposed to keep in mind what is said in detail, is it true, and what of it. This is the philosophy behind the analytical reading, and these are basic questions to keep in the back of your mind or even the forefront of your mind as you're doing the analytical reading. You're not going to say, okay, step 1, step 2, step 3, step 4. But instead, you're going to, the first step in this is you're going to actually classify the book. What kind of book is it, and what is the subject matter? Now, I should mention that at this point, we've switched back to this Start With Why book for the analytical, for showing how the analytical reading shows up on the bib card. So what I want to share with you from the Start With Why bib card is the step in stage 2 of analytical reading, come to terms with the author. And the mechanism that I've used is to highlight above and below the terms that I've found, and I just set them off with green pen marks. I could use a marker if I had one handy, and then list the definition and the page number where the definition was. So that's an addition. This is something that's new to me that I'm now doing as a result of reading Adler's book. I take step 6, identifying the propositions, and 7, identifying the arguments. I do those simultaneously with my analytical reading, and my mechanism now is to highlight in purple which one is a proposition and to carry the arguments underneath it, and then to do one more step which is to bring the propositions to the front of the card. So that gives me a spot to do a quick reference for them. And if I want to know what the author brought to bear for justification, I can just flip the bib card over and have it there. So that's what's new with me and how I now do a bib card. I'm using both sides of the card, which in the past I have not done. I'm being careful about what I bring to the front of the card. I'm inspecting my purpose more than once, and I'm recognizing that some books, sometimes very valuable books, can have all the juice in merely the multi-stages of a quality superficial reading, maybe all that's necessary to get the benefit out of a book. And that's actually perhaps even more valuable than having a speed reading skill where you can turn the pages fast and read without any plan. So I'm very, very, very happy with what I've learned from the Adler's method. And now I'm ready to begin to cap off this series on Adler with some topical reading. And so that's where I will turn next so that we can put to rest Adler's How to Read a Book. Check back next time. Bye-bye.